Okay, let me start the intro.
אני שייך, הלב נמשך, אני בוחר להישאר, הכל כדאי, אני חי בארץ ישראל. This is my home, this is the place to be, מרגיש את אלוקיי כאן בקרבי, אז תעלה אחי ושב איתי. This is my home, זה המקום שלי.
You're listening to the Bring Them Home Aliyah podcast, hosted by Josh Wander.
Welcome back to Bring Them Home. This is Josh Wander from Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh. We are honored to have today on the podcast Jake Turx. Jake is known as the Senior White House Correspondent for Ami Magazine. Are you in Washington right now?
I am not. I am in my bunker.
Okay, he's deep inside his bunker in an undisclosed location. Jake, I want to start from a quick question. 2 weeks ago, could you have imagined that we would be in where we are right now?
Why do you ask me now what I imagine will be taking place in 2 weeks from now?
I'm getting there. I'm working on past, present, and future.
Yeah. So could I have imagined 2 weeks ago that I'd be listening to such a fun intro and looking at you face to face with just seeing your delightful smile really just makes everything worthwhile.
Now getting on to more serious business. 2 weeks ago, could you have imagined that the Capitol would have been stormed, that the President of the United States would be in a position where they're trying to enact the 25th Amendment and impeach him? Could you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have never imagined they would be in the position we are today. Maybe you had to have a different vantage point, a different outlook on it.
Look, could I have imagined it? Sure. Did I? No. But look, people have asked me for the last year and a half. People are like, so who's going to win? How's it going to go? What's the outcome going to be? And I said, look, anything that we can assume is going to happen or imagine or predict or guess is not at all what's going to happen. So might as well just sit back, stock up on popcorn and enjoy the show. Because, you know, some people like to get to the end of the series. They want to know what happens at the end, the last episode. I'm not that kind of guy. I like to enjoy each episode one day at a time. And so far, the writers have not disappointed us. And by saying not disappointed us, they have devastatingly disappointed us so many times that nothing ceases to shock us. And yet we're still shocked.
Okay. Tell me about where you were on January 6th. This is not accusatory. I'm just curious. There's not an interrogation. Where were you on January 6th? What were you doing, and how did you get the news, and how did you react?
I do not have an alibi, if that's your question. So I was at Capitol Hill, cowering in fear for my life. No, I was very, very bravely doing my job. And
were you covering the rally?
Yeah, of course. Josh, you weren't doing that. I mean, someone has to do it and no one else volunteered.
I actually was doing that. We were covering it live from Jerusalem. We were maybe the only ones that were covering it because I realized the historic significance of it. But
no, but I mean in person. I mean, look, Jerusalem is so many times safer than the U.S. Capitol. How crazy is that? And this is after we were promised blood in the streets if the embassy was moved. So whatever blood in the streets, definitely not happening in the capital of the Jewish state. But not the same can be said about the capital of the leading country, the most powerful country, and the role model for the rest of the free world.
So you were there, you were present. What did you witness?
So while it was happening, especially for most of the beginning of it, it didn't seem like it was that much out of the ordinary. It looked like an almost entirely peaceful protest with some elements of people who were letting their emotions get the better of them. And that quickly descended into violence. But as we've come to learn since, much of it seemed to have been premeditated and planned out. And while there was a very big spontaneous element to it, and I think a lot of people just got swept up, or I mean, obviously, of the tens of thousands of people who were there, the overwhelming majority were peaceful. Not that that really matters, and not that that excuses anything, but I think of the violent people, thinking back, the impression I got was that most of them just got swept along with the mob mentality. Not that it excuses their behavior, but that there were only a very small percentage of them that actually had shown up with any specific plans. And of course, those people were the ones that we should have been able to foresee, and somebody dropped the ball.
Is your impression that those that had premeditated plans to be violent were those people from the Trump supporters, or were they from other organizations that were implanted within the Trump supporters?
No, they were definitely Trump supporters.
Not the ones that got swept up, the ones that were that had a plan from the beginning.
Yeah, they were definitely Trump supporters. I mean, the trouble with extremism in general in an age of social media is that it's very hard to know when someone is just joking or trolling or trying to get a rise out of people, and when someone is actually plotting something. So when they're talking in violent terms, and it's just very easy to dismiss it as, yeah, they were just messing around, but come on, like, you didn't take them seriously. But then when it actually happens, you're like, whoa, how could we not have seen that this was going to happen? But to answer your question more specifically,
you know what I'm getting at, though, because there's reports that Antifa and BLM and all these other groups were mixed in, and they were the ones that were agitating the whole thing.
Yeah, but if that was the case, I mean, we're a week past it, and if that was indeed the case, then why don't we? I mean, tell me a name. Show me someone who was arrested. Of the dozens of people arrested, tell me which one of them, or of people. I mean, these guys were not wearing masks, and Antifa is, and I've covered a lot of the Antifa protests. Their trademark is to cover their entire faces except for their eyes. They're like Iran for the past 2,000, 3,000 years. Iranian women and Afghani women. That's how they walk around, basically. And the people at the Trump rally, not only were their faces uncovered, but they were not wearing masks for the most part either. So it's very easy to spot them and know who these people were. And if there would have been an Antifa presence, we would know who they are by now. Now, of course, the counter argument could be that the same Antifa people have never shown their faces before. If they do show their faces now for the first time, we wouldn't know that they're Antifa because we've never made any kind of facial identification of them in the past. So I guess that's a good counterpoint, but I don't think that's what happened.
Since then, and since the social media ban of the president almost across the board, we have heard very little out of the White House. Have you still been corresponding from within the White House? Do you still get messages from the White House? What is in the past week and a half, what have you been doing as far as the reporting on what's going on in the White House?
Well, they just released a message statement a few minutes ago that the president strongly condemns all kind of violence and destruction, etc., in light of additional demonstrations that are scheduled to be taking place. The president spoke ahead of his Marine One departure yesterday to Alamo, Texas. He took questions for a few minutes from reporters on the south lawn of the White House. So to an extent, things have been going on the same as usual. He gave a speech yesterday that was even though he can't broadcast it on his own social media, but on others, anybody's free to broadcast a video on their own personal social media accounts. So it definitely
not all of us are, but
no, anyone's free to. Well, you're not free to.
No, I'm not free to. In fact, we are actually not streaming this on my Facebook page because it does not allow me to stream live anymore anything. It actually said, it gave me a warning as I tried to do it for this interview. I tried to stream it, and it said that your message, this is the exact words, your message couldn't be sent because it includes content that other people on Facebook have reported as abusive. So that's this interview. So I'm not sure why or who would have reported this as abusive, but I have attempted numerous times over the past week to post things live, and I clearly have been flagged. But okay, let's.
Well, they certainly seem to know something about us that I think. I mean, I'd be curious to know these things about myself as well. But I mean, you know what your mistake is, right?
Go for it. I'm listening.
Your mistake is that you're not the dictator of Iran tweeting anti-Semitic stuff.
Ah.
That's your big mistake.
That was my response immediately after he
I mean,
tweeted.
have you been sending out messages saying that the Jews worship the Church of Satan? Is that something that you've been tweeting about?
I haven't done that yet, but I could if that seems to be.
Have you been praising terrorists who've murdered Jews?
That would probably depend on who you ask, whether I'm praising terrorists. I mean, some people consider me a terrorist. It depends.
Have you murdered Jews though? I don't think
so.
No,
I've never murdered a Jew.
Okay,
no.
There you go. You see, this is easy. I can do this all day.
Okay.
I can find 100 things that you did wrong right now. I just told you like.
Well, and in the same vein, that is what many people are so upset about, as far as the reaction to what happened at the Capitol versus the reaction to what's been going on for almost the whole entire year in cities across America with these Antifa and the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, which have destroyed cities and stores and killed people, and the reaction has been very little.
Well, look, it's very simple. If a cat gets stuck on the tree in your backyard, I don't think anybody's going to really consider that a big story. But if a cat gets stuck on a tree at the White House, and there's going to be 24/7 around the clock coverage with all these interactive graphic displays and whatnot. So if a car crashes into a garbage can outside your house, nobody cares. But if the same thing happens at the White House, it's the biggest story in the news. And sometimes that's just the reality. If you burn down every single city around the country, but it isn't part of a bigger story, like a mob trying to murder members of Congress in the U.S. Capitol, breaking into the Capitol. You have to understand there are hundreds of protests that take place outside the Capitol every single year. And of these hundreds of protests, many of them attract tens of thousands of people. If any one of these protests decided to storm the Capitol, they would probably be able to get in, at least for a short amount of time. They would be able to break through because there just aren't that many cops to be able to handle a crowd of that magnitude, especially if some of the people in the crowd are armed or are thought to be armed. And cops can't just shoot into a crowd. So it highlighted a very frightening vulnerability that the seat of power of the most powerful country in the world is coming to terms with. And that is, there's a certain honor code that we have, that we assume that people are just not going to try to storm the Capitol and murder members of Congress. And that's what, in a way, that enables the free speech of people to demonstrate all over Washington, D.C., hundreds and hundreds of demonstrations a year. But as soon as, the White House used to not have a fence around it. Capitol is very hard to fence off, but doesn't seem like there's a choice now. I mean, I don't know if you remember the BLM people tried to topple a statue of Andrew Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to knock down the fence around the White House. And
they built a bigger fence.
Well, they were in the process of building that bigger fence, actually. But at what had happened then, the Secret Service ran into the press area of the White House, and they gave the press 5 minutes to clear out of the complex entirely, because they needed every single Secret Service member to be there defending, protecting that fence. Because if that fence collapses, then they have a straight path right up to the White House doors. And so they had to completely empty out the White House of press because they could not maintain a presence within the White House. Every single one of them was needed outside, holding back the mob until reinforcements could arrive. So had there not been a fence, we likely would have seen the same thing happening at the White House.
So things are not, have to be newsworthy, like building an extension onto my marpeset and here in Jerusalem, and then having the whole United Nations have an emergency session of the Security Council to condemn it. That's considered newsworthy.
Look, I'm not saying this in a cynical way, but I'm saying that when Lenin overthrew the Tsar, well, not the Tsar, but when he overthrew the interim government led by Kerensky in 1917, they didn't go for your family's house. They went for the seat of government, the communication towers, the train station. They had a certain set of very specific targets that they went after. And with a relatively small group of militia, they were able to completely take over the Russian government. If there's something like a premeditated attack against the capital of the United States, the Capitol building where laws are written out of, which makes it different and more sensitive than any attack against any other establishment or institution in the country.
You mentioned your publication did a survey before the election showing that something we all know, the vast majority of Orthodox Jews are supportive of President Trump. Since then, what has been the reaction of Orthodox Jewry in America to the seeming loss of President Trump? Do they buy into this, or do they believe there was some sort of problem with the integrity of the elections?
Well, it's impossible for me to be able to compare the 83% who had said that they would vote for Trump, and then the exit data that we found across many states like New York, New Jersey, Florida, that corroborated our polling results with speculation that is not scientifically polled. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are disappointed. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are still remain steadfast in their support for whatever reason. And it's not something that I can break down in any kind of definitive scientific manner. You know what I mean?
Okay, I buy that.
But what I would say is that regardless of how people feel now, and not just Trump supporters, no matter how his detractors feel, it's worthwhile to try to keep an eye on the bigger picture, and that is that everything that we felt for the past 6 years was just fleeting and in the moment. And everything that ended up playing out had very little bearing on how we had felt way back. So, if you know, however you felt when Trump was being impeached, and however you felt the way the Kavanaugh hearings were playing out, at the end of the day, there were far more immediate stories that brought about the results of the election. You know, the COVID and the BLM protests, etc., had a lot more to do with how people voted than anything that had happened 5 years prior to that. Anything that Trump said or anyone he insulted. So right now we're looking at it as in, how is this set of events making us feel right now? Is Trump's legacy tarnished forever? Is he ever going to be able to make any kind of political comeback? And this is not to say that he will, but this is being very dismissive of the fact that whatever happened in the moment in the past didn't necessarily have the kind of impact that we thought it would moving forward. And there's a lot that can still change that could make Trump look way, way worse or way, way better than people are assuming right now.
That is a great segue to speaking about, you're discussing the fact that people have very short memories. Jews throughout history have had very short memories. From one pogrom to the next, to one Inquisition to the next, to one Holocaust to perhaps the next. Jews don't remember from one day to the next why they should not be in exile. Perhaps we could argue that for the vast majority of Jewish history, Jews had no choice but to be in exile. They had no other place to go to. Today, there is another place to go to. Eretz Yisrael is not only a place of refuge, but it's also any believing Jew understands that that is the place where the destiny of the Jews is meant to take us to. How, again, I'm not asking you for scientific data here. Your feeling on the ground in America as an Orthodox Jew, has anything changed because of the whole Trump administration until what is going on today, to change the minds and beliefs of Jews in America that it is time to get up and leave and go home?
I mean, how practical is it for people to make Aliyah now anyway with COVID? Still
23,000 we've had during COVID. Aliyah is ripe. Nefesh B'Nefesh is getting more calls than ever before in its history.
23,000 over the past year.
Correct.
And how does that compare to previous years?
Huge. It's huge,
Yeah,
huge
no,
uptick.
I really don't know the numbers. Yeah.
Huge uptick. And the calls are just through the roof, several 100% more than normal years, previous years. We're talking about definitely more interest when it comes, but again, what is this is a big debate that we have. I'm often told that I have a weekly podcast with Rabbi Nachman Kahana, and he was speaking about how it's really important not only for Jews to move here now, but the Jews that are stuck behind should be aware that of Jewish history and understand that this is a very precarious time for Jews to be in America, and that they should be prepared to defend themselves should it be necessary. And I've often been asked the question, or actually rabbis even have complained to me that it's not right that we use fear mongering to try to encourage Aliyah. We should be telling people the good things about the Eretz Yisrael, why it's good to come here, why it's a mitzvah, why Hashem wants us here. But to scare people away to come to Eretz Yisrael is not the right method to do. But many of us here at Eretz Yisrael, and again, I haven't done any scientific surveys either, but from my anecdotal experiences here, many Jews here believe that we are looking at 1938 Europe, and that there is a impending disaster about to happen in the United States to Jews and perhaps around the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, fear mongering, I think, has the connotation that you're being disingenuous. If you truly believe that people's lives are in danger, then is it still considered fear mongering?
Well, it's an interesting. We have a show with Tamar Yonah, and she was saying, we were talking about conspiracy theories, and she said that Jabotinsky actually spoke at her grandfather's house, if I remember the story correctly, because he wasn't allowed to speak in the local synagogue. He was told that it was conspiracy theories, that he was saying that Europe's Jews are in danger, and little did they know how much they were in danger. So,
Right. So there you go. I mean, if you really believe that people's lives are in danger, then the only way you could compel them to move is by opening up their eyes to the dangers that they face, right?
Do you believe that?
I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. Even if I did believe that, I mean, I'm not going to speak even for myself. I'm sure there are a lot of people who believe that, but who say, but look, it's not so simple. How do I even start? And I'm not going to sell my house and then find a job and find schools for the kids. It's just too much and whatever. And I'm sure there was a lot of that in Germany and in Poland, and people saying, and even in Hungary after the war broke out, with people saying, look, you know what, everything works out. It's going to work out one way or another. We just have to hang in there, because we're inclined to see the best in people, and we always assume that there are still better days ahead of us.
What we do know, and this has happened numerous times in history, is that when there is civil unrest, the Jews are the ones to blame. They're always used as the scapegoat. and perhaps even more so when they're in key positions in the government, when you have the Secretary of Treasury is Jewish, when you have a White House that's being run by a Jew, amongst other people, when you have all these Jewish positions of power, the undersecretary that's a Chabad Chassid. I mean, you have Jews in power, and that is more of a reason to be concerned, perhaps, that if there were to be a anti-Semitic backlash, that it would be against the Jews of America.
And look, the incoming administration already has announced many Jews to high-profile positions, and I say this often. We always get blamed when the weather's bad, but how come the anti-Semites never praise us or thank us when the weather's nice outside? When the weather's bad, they say, yeah, the Jews control the weather and look at how bad the weather is. But they never say, you know what? It's 70, it's sunny, it's beautiful. Hey, Jews, thank you. I say 70 Fahrenheit. I don't know what that would be in Celsius terms. Hey, Jews, thank you for the good weather. They don't do that. When we run governments effectively, they don't thank us. When Hollywood puts out decent content, they don't thank us. They only complain when it's something bad. And I think that's a double standard. I think that's not fair. I think they should be a little bit more honest. Bad enough.
You have pretty high expectations for anti-Semites if you think they have to be fair and honest.
Hey, Josh, someone's got to say it. I'm sorry. If bad enough that we're running everything at the same time, and we're a very, very small group of people trying to be everywhere at once, you can't set expectations that we're going to succeed at every single thing every single time, and then completely disregard the few positive achievements that we have to our credit.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. See, this is what Facebook was afraid was gonna.
Before you start quoting the protocols of elder design, I decided I'm just gonna move on to the next. It's interesting because there's a Dvar Torah by Rabbi Meir Kahana, Hashem Yikom Damo, that he asks a very pointed question about Megillat Esther. We know the story of Megillat Esther, that the Jews in the beginning of the story are doing wonderful. They're in key high-profile positions, as you mentioned, in the government. They're being invited to the king's parties. They're dining there with kosher food and the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash, and they seem to be on top of the world. And then in a fleeting moment, all of a sudden that whole world is turned around and they are about to be annihilated. The point that changes everything, the Megillah uses the description as Ha'ir Shushan Nivocha. It uses this adjective that the Jews of Shushan are Nivocha, are confused. And Rabbi Kahana says, what a strange adjective to use, right? You're about to be wiped out. Your people are about to be annihilated. You could be fearful. You could be scared. You could be concerned. I could give you a dozen different great adjectives, but confused, what is the confusion? And he says that that's exactly the mentality of a Jew in exile, that they think that they're on top of the world and they don't understand that they're in exile. And I always say the worst exile is the one that you don't realize you're in. And that's what caused the total confusion, because one minute they think they're on top of the world, and they're running the White House, and they're running the economy, and they're running everything, Hollywood, and the next minute, all of a sudden they're the target.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't believe, and I don't have any kind of evidence to back up, nor do I have any involvement in any kind of vast Jewish conspiracy to run the world. I just want to make that very clear.
I forgot to mention that they're also there are Jews that are senior White House correspondents.
The media, we run yeah. No, but look, we can't even come along and agree on anything, and we're definitely not the right kind of people to run every single aspect of everything that matters. So there you go. Just for the record, to be clear. you're raising an excellent point that every time we get too comfortable in galut, we tend to get some kind of a wake up call that startles us and confuses us because we always think that we finally figured it out and now everything's going to be good and it's going to be smooth sailing from here on out, and then something completely unexpected shakes us to the core. And this is something that had been going on 2,500 years ago, as you referenced, and it still keeps happening now, and we're still confused every time it happens.
The Meshech Chochmah is a famous Devar Torah in Parshas Bechukosai, where he says, and this was written in, I think it was in 1923, he wrote this. He wrote that because the Jews of Berlin are making Berlin their Yerushalayim, that is clear that there's going to be a terrible storm that is going to have to wipe over Europe as a result of that. And when Jews get so comfortable when they make their Brooklyns, their Yerushalayim, I'm just picking on Brooklyn, it could be any place. That's when we have much to fear, because the natural / spiritual state of things cannot accept Jews being too comfortable in exile.
Right, right.
So you're a Jew in exile. You're an Orthodox Jew in exile, but you're also somebody who's supportive of Israel.
Okay,
How do you balance that?
How do I balance which aspect of that?
You know that Jews are supposed to be in Israel. That's clearly what the trend is and where the destiny of the Jewish people is. But meanwhile, you're very seemingly very comfortable and happy where you are in America. Do you have any doubts about that?
I don't know if I'm happy. I mean, I don't know if happy would. I mean, happy is a very loose relative term. You try to make the most of things, right? You try not to second guess yourself. You try not to, you know, you're asking from a religious point of view.
Also, I mean, you're choosing to be there. I have a good friend who refuses to call the Jews in America the Jews in exile, because he says that's not an exile. Galut is when someone is forced to be, we are forced into exile. You're forced to be where you are. Galinu me'artzenu v'nitrachaknu me'al admatenu. You're in the diaspora because you choose to be there. You're not forced to be there. You can get on an El Al flight. You can make Aliyah, and you could be here next week. You're choosing to be where you are.
Status quo is not necessarily a choice. You don't know what. If it was that simple, I'd be there already, right?
I want you to speak about Orthodox. I'm sorry that I'm picking on you as an individual.
No,
I don't mean you as an individual.
No, I can't speak. Look, if I can't even speak on behalf of myself effectively, how can I speak on behalf of Orthodox Jewry, right? So no, I definitely can't speak on behalf of anybody else. I can't even get any words out to adequately express how I feel about this. From a religious standpoint, I don't have any kind of particular position religiously, one way or another. From a practical standpoint, I definitely know that I will be living in Israel one day in the near future, and I see my present life as being some kind of a corridor towards that reality, but that the reality is something that is going to happen at a time that has already been predetermined by forces that are beyond my comprehension.
You'll have to explain what that means. I don't understand.
That means that I definitely.
Are you speaking spiritually? You're speaking physically. I got confused there.
I'm speaking practically. It might sound vague to you because it feels vague to me as well. But there's this, sometimes there's certain things in life that when they happen, you look back and say, oh, well, obviously, for sure, everything that has led up to this was a build up to this event happening. There's certain times in people's lives when you have this moment of clarity where you feel that all of this now makes, like, it sheds light on everything else, and now everything makes sense. I see myself one day living in Israel, looking back and saying, oh, so this is what this whole journey was about. And now I'm here finally. But it's not as simple as just saying, well, why didn't you do it now and be here by next week? Certain things, if it's not destined to happen at this time, then trying to bring about something that isn't fully mature might not necessarily mean that it's going. I mean, look at the Baal Shem Tov. You look at a lot of spiritual masters who tried making the journey before the proper time, and they were not able to complete the journey. So different people have different sets of circumstances, and the circumstances in which I find myself right now. And despite I just admitted to you that me living in Israel is an inevitability, I have not yet been shown the direct path between that reality and how it connects to where I'm at right now.
I have so many questions about what you just said. And first of all, I already told you this is going to be a much shorter interview, so I want to respect your time. And if you need to go, I understand. So let me know if I can ask some additional questions.
I've got another 15 minutes.
Okay. So you started off saying that from a religious perspective, and I'm not trying to diagnose, I'm not trying to dissect what you said, and I'm not trying to debate even what you said. I find this a curiosity, because most people are not as honest as you when it comes to these things. You said when it comes to a religious perspective, you don't have one way or the other. It does, like Eretz Yisrael is not. Am I accurately quoting you?
I mean, we could go back and watch a video and see exactly which set of words I used. From a religious perspective, I don't have any kind of particular religious leaning when it comes to Israel, not out of ignorance, but out of, there are a lot of very strong points that I've heard made from many different religious perspectives within Orthodox Judaism. And I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think it's that important for me to throw myself into an argument that precedes me by centuries and which smarter people than me are on all sides of.
So I find this fascinating because it really proves what I've always said, which is that most Orthodox Jews in America, I believe, do not have a position either being pro or anti-Aliyah. It's just they sort of choose to ignore it. It's just sort of something that they don't discuss in polite company, or something that they don't think about, or maybe they choose subconsciously not to think about it. Whatever the case is, it's just something that's not really dealt with. I know when I was growing up in America and I went to the yeshivas there, it was not a topic that was brought up. It was not a topic that was discussed. If you did bring it up, it was sort of pushed aside. It's something that's really, again, whatever the reasons are, it's something that's really just not dealt with usually on a day-to-day. Now, that could have changed over the years. Again, maybe current events have changed that somewhat. But I feel that it's something that's more ignored than something. And it's interesting that you say that. Let me just tell you a little bit of my perspective. You mentioned the Baal Shem Tov, you mentioned other people hundreds of years ago that tried to get it. Even the famous tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein, which we have whole shows about discussing this part of the tshuva. But he mentions these. First of all, he wrote this tshuva in 1951, just a couple years after the state of Israel started. And he says that he brings two different problems with coming here. One is that it may be a sakonas darachim, which in the times of the Baal Shem Tov or the Vilna Gaon, or you're talking about hundreds of years ago, there's no question for sure. If you go to the Balei Tosfos, there was no question that people got on a boat and you went to Israel. There's a good chance you're not going to make it. Today, getting on a plane is safer than getting on the BQE or getting on the Beltway in DC. It's pretty safe for air travel. I don't think people have to be worried about that as sakonas derachim. And when he speaks about the spiritual aspect, he quotes the Tosfos that says Rabbeinu Chaim, famous thing at Tosfos and Ksubas. They says maybe we can't fulfill all the mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz today. So maybe there's a concern that we should better to stay behind the Golos and not come there itself. We can't perform them. Then perhaps in 1951, maybe that made some sense because it was right after the beginning of the creation of the modern state, and there were a lot of questions about Shemitah, about survival, and there were a lot of mitzvos that were in question at the time. Today, we're living in a very different reality than in the Baalei Tosfos' time, in the times of the Baal Shem Tov, and even in the times that Moshe wrote his Tshuva in 1951. I think living in the year Tavshin Pei Aleph in 2021, we're living in a very different reality, which many Orthodox Jews, I think, don't get. Correct me if I'm wrong.
First of all, I think you're spot on about pretty much everything you've said in terms of people's attitudes. And just in my own personal experience, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody, I want to be clear about that, is that, yeah, people tend to be dismissive. I'm actually really enjoying this topic. And this is something that I think about very often myself. And it's a conversation that I don't have often because it's not something that comes up. It's not something that people talk about in shul. It's not something people discuss at weddings. It's not something that really comes up in polite day-to-day conversation. And if someone brings it up, it's quickly dismissed. And if it's not quickly dismissed, then it's sort of introduced from a perspective of, or rather countered with from a perspective of, well, this is the religious outlook that I have on this, and that settles it. So it's very unusual for me to have an honest dialogue about this. And you know, I'll open myself up to you right now that I have this fear that when I do move to Eretz Yisrael in the future, I'm going to look back and I'll be so mad at myself for not having done so sooner. And this is something that, despite this knowledge, it doesn't necessarily translate into me being able to just drop everything, pick up, and move there.
Okay, let me ask you a personal question about myself. Me and my role, that I feel the necessity for some reason that God has called upon me to try to wake up the Jewish people and to try to educate and inform the Jewish people of this important, unspoken about subject. What can I do to try to breach this, to break the ice, and to create an environment in which this is a subject which is not taboo, which is something which is in like we said, in polite company, one can discuss this and have this dialogue.
Look, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and she's adorable, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for her. But if she decides, or if you decide that she would look very good driving a convertible, I would say that this is not the right age to have this kind of conversation, but I do welcome this conversation once she's old enough. I feel that I'm not spiritually, maybe physically, maybe emotionally, I don't know the word, but I'm somehow not up to the point where it has been preordained for me to make this move.
Well, you keep using that word preordained, and I get shivers whenever I hear it because I
don't know what it means myself. It's just a word.
No, it's not because I don't understand it. It's because I understand too much about that mentality of, you know. I'll tell you a word that I always say. The Gemara says that there are a list of questions that are asked of a person after they pass away. And one of those questions is Ha'im tzapita liYeshua, did you anticipate the Geula, the final redemption? So I said, I have no doubt that for 2,000 years, that was indeed what was asked of people that passed away, because what else could you expect from a Jew living in a shtetl in Europe, but to pick up a Tehillim and to start the daven that the Geula should happen? What else could they do? You're stuck in a shtetl in Europe 200 years ago. What are you supposed to do except for picking up a Tehillim? Today, I believe that the question, with Lanius Dati, and I believe that the question has changed. The question is no longer Ha'im tzapita liYeshua, did you anticipate the Geula? The question is Ha'im pa'alta liYeshua, did you actually do something to bring about the redemption? Today, we're in a completely, again, going back to what I said earlier, we're in a completely different mitzias, a completely different reality, where we're able to actually do concrete steps in order to bring the Geula. We're no longer in a situation where we're stuck in a shtetl reading Tehillim, which is not bad. This is read Tehillim, but to say that you're preordained and there's something higher than you, a higher power that's preventing you, without taking the initial steps that are of ishtadlut that is expected of anyone to get things done, especially in a reality like today where people can get onto an airplane and get to Eretz Yisrael. I have a real problem with this, the idea that we're just waiting for something that's preordained. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, I get that. And listening to you using my own words against me, I sort of get the same kind of feeling that you had. But at the same time, it's very complex within my own mind. It's not like I have it all figured out. And so I use these vague terms in order maybe to deflect from the very reasonable points that you're making. But let me press you on something specific that you said. How do you feel that individuals making Aliyah in any way impacts the final redemption?
Oh, great question. What that tells me, Jake, is you're not listening to my podcast, because that's what I speak about all the time. But okay, we'll give you it in a nutshell.
Give me an opportunity to explain it to people who are listening now for the first time.
Right. Well, I could tell you this. It's clear from all the Jewish sources that an integral part of the Geula is kibbutz galios. An integral part of Mashiach is kibbutz galios. At the point where the majority of Jewish people are here in Eretz Yisrael, which, by the way, according to some, it already has happened. According to everybody else, it's about to happen. We're right on that edge of having the majority of Jews of the world here back home. At that point, everything changes. Shemitah becomes midoraisa. We have to start keeping Yovel. I could just give you lists of things that change the whole dynamic of a Jewish nation. Is when the majority of Jews are here. It's something that we have failed over and over again to do. When Ezra and Nehemiah called for the Jewish people to return from Bavel, 42,360 Jews heeded that call. The vast majority of Jews, including the Gedolei Hador in Bavel, decided to stay back. And we know they made a mistake. We would have saved 2,000 years of Gullus. Would they have made the right decision and come back home? By the way, I always tell people this is an amazing trivial fact that 42,360 Jews came back from Gullus Bavel on an average day before Corona. On an average day, Ben Gurion Airport is able to facilitate 50,000 people in a day. On a peak day, it's 100,000. So in one day, we're able to facilitate bringing more Jews back than the entire return of Gullus Bavel. To not understand that, to make that mental shift, that there's a different reality going on right now than we have seen for 2,000 years. Forget the fact that if you brought any of the rabbis from previous generations, whether it be the Rambam or the Baal Shem Tov or anyone else to Eretz Yisrael of today, I have no question they would say this is the Geula. To see a Jewish, we take it for granted, but to see a Jewish government, whatever you feel of the government, that's a whole different conversation. The government is a Jewish government. The army is a Jewish army. Whether they're conducting themselves as a Jewish army, again, different conversation. It's a Jewish army for the first time in 2,000 years. We have, if you spoke to somebody just a mere 70 years ago, and you told them that soon there would be a kibbutz galios with millions of Jews back in Eretz Yisrael, that there would be a binyan Yerushalayim, a bustling city with almost 1 million people in it, they would look at you like you're insane. Today, we're living with these nevuahs unfolding before our eyes, and most people are oblivious of it. Most people here are even oblivious. I always tell people you can live in a place called Geula and think that you're in the same situation as you were in a shtetl 200 years ago in Europe, and you're completely oblivious. You're as far away from the Geula as possible if you don't understand that being in Yerushalayim and Tafshin Pei Aleph is a completely different reality. Unfortunately, many people are in that position. But definitely when you go around the world, you see people that are oblivious to the fact for the first time in 2,000 years, we have dozens of Kohanim that are living in and around the old city of Yerushalayim with Bigdei Kahuna inside their closets, ready to do the Avoda. We have dozens of Kolim.
I know some of these people, by the way.
We have dozens of Kolim that learned Kodshim in order to instruct them. We've refounded all of we've rebuilt all of the Kalim of the base of Migdash. We've refounded Tcheles. We're in the process of breeding the Paraduma. I didn't even get to, like you mentioned your 2-year-old daughter and said you're not up to yet to that as American Jewry. right, is not up to that level where they're willing to have that conversation. I'm not even getting to the real conversation. The meat and potato of the conversation is how we're going to build what you see behind me into the Beis Hamikdash, which is being done on actively every day by the Jews that are living here. The Jews that unfortunately are not here are not part of that process. They could be bystanders, but they're not active participants in the process.
Yeah, and I'm very much aware of what you're describing, and to a similar extent, you're talking about people living in Geula not being aware of the Geula going on around them. Wouldn't you say the same about people who go to the Kosel every day and they pray over there and they say Tillim, but they see the Kosel as a means of its own without really contemplating what it is that's on the other side of the Kosel that the real prize is?
I just want to make it clear as a disclaimer. I did not pay him to say this. This is this is something I discuss all the time.
Clearly established I don't listen to your podcast, so influenced by anything you've said.
I always tell people that we, as a Jewish people, have hit a wall when it comes to the Kosel. The people that have gotten to the Kosel and really are totally oblivious to what the Kosel is. Fortunately, I live on Har Zeisim. This is my view from Har Zeisim. We don't have the same feeling just because we can see that there's something beyond that wall. We understand that there's something to strive for. I hope that the day will come soon when the Kosel will be VIP parking for what's behind it, because that is really what's important. And people that have turned to Kosel, I'm already getting into very controversial area over here. People have turned the Kosel into, I hesitate to use the word because I know I'm going to be attacked afterwards, but the people have turned the Kosel into an avodah zara and are praying and think that they're praying to stones and not understanding what's the significance is what's behind it. They're really missing the ball.
Would the word tourist attraction be a more neutral way of expressing that?
Yeah, but they don't treat it as a tourist, right? They don't treat that the same as Masada. They understand that there's something significant about it.
No, yeah, but I'm saying people who go there, you take selfies, you put a paper in the wall, and then you tell people you were there, right? Sure, you daven, okay, it's like you go into Disneyland, you wait online. That's part of the process. So you go to the Kosel, you pray, okay.
Jake, you are light years ahead of, I think, what most Orthodox Jews in America are, not only because you're willing to have an honest conversation about moving to Eretz Yisrael, but your understanding of the significance of the Kosel and what's beyond it, and really our end goal, I think is commendable, because, like I said, it is something which is not discussed, and either intentionally or not, whatever it is, it's not something that is discussed. And I hope that we can, hopefully with this and other podcasts that we're doing, hopefully could wake some people up. I want just the final, I know I'd love to speak to you another hour about this. What do you anticipate for the next week? Next week, everybody's asking what's going to happen. Everybody's in trepidation about what's going to happen. Is anything going to happen?
I'm just happy to enjoy the show one step at a time. But you just snapped me out of a very, very fun conversation and brought me back to work, which is not nearly as fun for me as.
I'm running out of time. That's why I'm just gonna have to get the questions in.
But no, I want to ask you a question. Do you believe? Are you fully confident that one day you're going to be looking out of your like your porch or your bedroom window or whatever it is, and see a Beis Hamikdash standing on the spot of where the Dome of the Rock currently is?
I have no doubt in my mind.
Okay, you have no doubt.
Once again, let me clarify that. One of the Taryag mitzvos, right? Where all these Orthodox Jews running around the world saying that there's 613 mitzvos, a third of which can only be done here in Eretz Yisrael. One of those Taryag mitzvos is to build Binyan Beis Hamikdash, to build a Beis Hamikdash. It's not something that we're supposed to wait for, like you said, preordained, that it's going to fall from the sky. That's the whole Mikdash Min HaShamayim is a whole different conversation.
That's not what I mean by preordained. That's not what I mean by preordained. So, but you might be seeing where I'm going with this, because have you ever actually physically lifted a rock and started walking up the Temple Mount to place down a foundational stone on the spot of the Beis Hamikdash?
You're going to get me into trouble in this one.
Okay, but I mean,
yes, the answer is yes, multiple times. The first time led to a huge riot in which 13 people were killed. 13 Arabs were killed there, and it was the cornerstone of the Beis Hamikdash that we tried to bring up. We're going back 30 years, over 30 years ago.
Wow,
I'm aging myself over here. Yeah, well,
before I was born.
now you understand why Facebook is taking me off. We tried to bring the cornerstone to the Har Bayis to build the Beis Hamikdash, and it started riots across the country. This was then called the Temple Mount Faithful. It's evolved since then to different things, but I am involved in many projects.
Okay.
Many projects.
And so in 30 years, though, you haven't managed to place the foundation stone.
Oh, we've placed multiple foundation stones.
Yeah. Well, you're saying that riots broke out, so it.
No. I don't mean it. I mean it figuratively, not literally. Okay. We have moved in so many ways in the past 3 decades.
I'm talking literally.
But it's all leading to that step.
Good. Thank you. So back to the question you're asking about, how come I don't just get up and go to Eretz Yisrael? I've been to Eretz Yisrael a number of times. Every time I leave is harder than all previous times combined. And yet I'm still not living there. Why? Because we try to make progress. We try to get to the point that we know we're eventually going to reach. And then sometimes we get the very strong message that now is not the right time for this particular action. In your case, it's the actual physical building of the temple, which I'm not in any way supporting nor condemning nor taking any kind of position on. And I'm not taking a non-position as my position either. But at the same time, you're refusing to give me the same kind of flexibility in terms of my own life, and you're insisting that I drop everything and reach home plate when I'm telling you that I tried getting out of the batter's box and got the very strong message that I'm not at bat yet.
To the contrary, I think that moving to Eretz Yisrael is the first base. There's a long. I didn't get to what's second, third, fourth, and home base.
But if your team is not batting yet, you can't get to first base. You could be the first baseman on defense, but you can't actually get the first base for the offense yet. You got to wait your turn, and sometimes it could be 2 outs. You're waiting for that third out for a while, and it's taking a lot longer than you thought. And then it's your team's turn to be at bat, but you're batting 8th. So you might not even get a shot at the first or second inning.
So just continuing this analogy, I'm standing here on third base, and I'm watching you as you hit the ball and stand there and wondering why the hell, excuse the language, are you not moving and running as fast as you can to your first base? And I just see you figuratively, meaning the Jewish people of America, standing there after they've hit the ball and just standing there and not moving. And I'm like, we're about to win this game. If you just move, run to first base and nothing.
I wish life was so straightforward and simple. But look, this conversation has really been a lot of fun, Josh, and I look forward to having more such conversations, both on and off the record.
Thank you. And like I said, this was totally, by the way, not what I planned for this conversation.
No, me neither, but I freed up some extra time for this.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Jake, for being in it. And I'll send you a link. And I know that your mind is in the right place. And I hope, and I firmly believe that you are in a position to influence people. You have always been in a place to influence people. Hopefully that now that you've freed up some time after this newest chapter in your life, now you can move on to trying to influence people to bigger and greater things. And I hope that you really do live up to your name.
All right. By all means, Josh, send me a link. But more importantly, feel free to send me a taste of home. I've got plenty of space here. So.
Well, you're always invited. You're always invited.
Okay.
Okay. Take care. Be well.
Thank you for listening to the Bring Them Home Aliyah podcast. If you identify with our message, please subscribe and tell your friends about us too. You can leave us a review on iTunes, as that really helps us grow. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. For sponsorship opportunities and for all other inquiries, please email us at bringthemhomeisrael@gmail.com. Check out our website at www.israeltorah.org for more content on this vital topic.
This is my home, to have my
Okay, let me just make sure we're actually offline before we start having a real conversation. Let me.
We can just talk on the phone.
There we go. Okay, we're offline.
Still says live though. It says live on YouTube on the top.